Now, Fox News Alert, as we await new announcements from President-elect Trump's transition team after a weekend of high-profile meetings at his New Jersey golf club. More scheduled today at Trump Tower. Good morning to you. I'm John Scott, and we welcome a familiar face.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm Melissa Francis, in today for Jenna Lee. A transition conference call just wrapping up, with Mr. Trump holding more meetings today, sitting down with former presidential candidate Governor Rick Scott Perry and Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin, with the president-elect's top aide Kellyanne Conway saying both are under consideration for cabinet posts.
Peter Doocy is following all of the breaking developments live at Trump Tower in New York City. Peter?
Good morning, John. We learned this morning that the Democratic Congresswoman who left a position at the DNC so she could support the socialist candidate for president, Bernie Sanders, earlier in the cycle, is at Trump Tower for a meeting with the president-elect today. We also know who else is on the guest list for an elevator ride upstairs. Some of the names: former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, former Labor Secretary Elaine Chao, who's also married to the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin, who just went upstairs, and Texas Governor Rick Perry. Governor Perry was one of the first prominent Republicans to back off harsh criticism about Trump not being conservative enough to publicly say during the primaries that he would go and work for a Trump administration if there ever was one, and it looks like the early support earned him a job interview. The splashiest sit-down Trump had over the weekend was with Mitt Romney, one of his fiercest critics a few weeks ago. But there do seem to be multiple different ways the Trump administration could tackle the president-elect's first term, and the vice president-elect is giving us a roadmap.
Wants to focus out of the gate on repealing Obamacare and beginning the process of replacing Obamacare with the kind of free market solutions that he campaigned on. From there, we'll work on issues ranging from ending illegal immigration, reviving our economy through tax reform, rebuilding the military, restoring the infrastructure of this country.
But the Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said this weekend that just because Republicans control all of Washington come January doesn't mean that the Dems are going to make it easy for President-elect Trump, because Schumer says he does not believe Trump has a mandate by voters to govern because Trump did not win the popular vote. John?
Peter Doocy in New York City. Peter, thank you. Touch a little bit more on all of this now as President-elect Trump chooses his cabinet members. One of his goals seems to be party unity, but his vice president says it goes even beyond that.
I just want to reassure people that what President-elect Donald Trump said on election night, he absolutely meant from the bottom of his heart. He is preparing to be the president of all of the people of the United States of America. And to watch him bringing together people of diverse views, bringing together people that differed with him strongly, seeing him talk to leaders around the world, I just want to reassure every American that in the days ahead, I'm very confident that they're going to see President-elect Donald Trump be a president for all of the people, and we embrace that principle, and we're going to work hard to make that principle every day that we serve.
Joining us now with more, Ian Pryor, Communications Director for American Crossroads. Also with us, Doug Schoen, Fox News contributor and a former advisor to President Clinton and to former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks
Ian,
so much.
There were a lot of concerns, even among Republicans, about who Donald Trump's appointees might be when his first two big jobs go to the chairman of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus, and also a senator like Jeff Sessions. Are Republicans feeling reassured?
Well, I think they should be. I mean, look, someone like Jeff Sessions, this is someone that was the United States Attorney in Alabama. He was the Attorney General as well in Alabama, and he's been on the Judiciary Committee in the Senate for 20 years. So I would go so far as to say there may not be somebody more qualified out there than Jeff Sessions to be Attorney General. But let's take that a step further. He's going out, he's talking to Mitt Romney, he's talking to Ted Cruz, Nikki Haley, people that were critics during the campaign season. And now he's talking to Tulsi Gabbard, a Democratic Congresswoman from Hawaii, who, if you recall, was one of the first critics of Debbie Wasserman Schultz at the DNC. So it's really interesting how he's conducting these interviews, and it certainly does look like he's going to take ideas from a lot of different places.
Doug, are you surprised at the roster of people who are making their way to Trump's golf course and Trump Tower to be interviewed?
I wouldn't say I'm surprised. I mean, Donald Trump as Senator Schumer said, was not the recipient of anything more than a plurality of the popular vote. He did win an electoral college mandate, but his larger mission, as the vice president said, is to bring people together. His first goal is to solidify his party, and by interviewing Mitt Romney, I think that'd be a fabulous appointment as Secretary of State. And now to have him reaching out to Democrats is a great second step, because we need unity and we need success. We're not partisans now. We're all Americans. We want Donald Trump to succeed.
We're looking at live interior pictures from Trump Tower because we're waiting for former Texas Governor Rick Perry, who famously competed against Donald Trump in the Republican primary. Ultimately did not last very long, but he is going to be making his way into a meeting with Donald Trump, the president-elect, today. That party unity, Ian, is that something that is easier to talk about than to actually achieve, or are Republicans going to, get on board with the president-elect pretty quickly?
Well, I think naturally they're going to start to get on board with the president-elect. There was a poll today showing a big spike in President-elect Trump's approval ratings, and that's natural after an election, but I think he's doing all the right things. Look, some of the people he's talking to I really think are going to do a good job if he ends up selecting them. Scott Brown is a name that came up on Friday for the Veterans Affairs position, somebody that was a 30-year individual in the National Guard. He retired as a colonel. He was on the Veterans Committee in the Senate. I mean, these are good possible picks that could lead an administration that is looking to bring, like Doug said, both sides of the aisle together, and I think he's well on his way to doing that. Doug,
there were a lot of eyebrows raised after the 2008 elections when Barack Obama appointed Hillary Clinton to be his Secretary of State. If somebody like Mitt Romney were to get the job offer from Donald Trump, I mean, there was way more bad blood between those two, at least during the campaign season, than there was between Hillary and Barack Obama.
Well, I think that's true, and Governor Romney is somebody who said in the 2012 election that the greatest threat to the United States is Russia and Vladimir Putin. Obama disagreed, but clearly there's evidence to support Governor Romney's view, and General Michael Flynn and the president-elect himself have a very different view of Russia. So I think it would be great to get a diversity of opinions and views on foreign policy at the highest levels of our government.
Doug Schoen. Ian Pryor, gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Going to take you now to San Antonio, Texas. This is Police Chief McManus briefing the media at police headquarters after the shootings of his officers this weekend. Let's listen in.
Suspect to be extremely dangerous both to the police and to the public. So if you see this car out there, or see the individual that you believe matches the description of the person in the video, please call us. Don't approach him on your own. And we'll entertain any questions that you may have.
Chief, why was this man inside headquarters?
We questioned a number of people. He was one of them. Who are you talking about?
The surveillance photo of this man going into headquarters.
I don't know why he was in headquarters. We have some ideas why we believe he may have been in headquarters, but we're not quite sure. There's several motives that we're looking at.
In that video, he leaned down and said something over the intercom that allowed him access. Do you know what he said to the person on the other end?
I do, but I'm not going to reveal that right now. We don't know that really plays into the investigation, but I'm not going to put out too many details on that.
Did you ever find out what happened to the original driver, or did you witness any of this?
The original driver was questioned by our homicide detectives.
You said you...
Questioned by our homicide detectives.
You said you questioned a number of people. Is that correct? Or not? Did you
we talked to a number of people.
But they were all released?
Yes.
Chief, the suspect in the video clearly looks agitated. He's pacing back and forth. Do you feel that there's a connection between the suspect's state of mind at that point and what happened 4 hours later?
I could only be speculating, so I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that.
Can you tell us why you believe him to be the suspect? What the main reason? You centered on this man?
There's a number of reasons for that the investigators have surmised, but based on their conversations about the issue. But I'm not going to go into that level of detail.
Can you say what time this happened? What time you tried to get into the police department when he was?
It was earlier in the morning.
About 7:45.
Yes.
From the time.
Yes.
Chief, do you know who he talked to in the police department and why he left only 20 seconds after entering?
He talked to the clerk at the desk.
And can you tell us what he...
He asked a question, the clerk said that they would help him with that, and he said never mind and walked out.
Do you know what the question was?
Yes.
Well, what did he ask?
I'm not going to say what it was.
Can you categorize the depth and the breadth of this search? Has anything like this happened in San Antonio before?
We have pulled out all the stops. We have engaged our federal partners, our state partners, and our local partners in the search for this individual. The search has gone on since we started yesterday afternoon and has not stopped all night and to this point, and it will not stop until this person is in custody.
What happened with the person of interest that you guys had in custody? Is he released already? Or?
We spoke with him and he was released.
And that was through U.S. Marshal Service, correct?
Pardon?
That was through U.S. Marshal Service, correct? Or was there a separate?
There's a task force, I'll call it, working on this case. So it was, the person was brought in for questioning and released.
Chief, have you been in touch with your counterparts in St. Louis? You believe...
A sad time in San Antonio, Texas. The police chief, if you're not familiar with what happened there, the police chief was filling in some details about a suspect whose name they say they know. They haven't located the suspect yet. But he was in police headquarters for some reason and carrying on conversations inside police headquarters in San Antonio, which apparently got a little agitated. The man later left the building, came upon an officer who was outside police headquarters actually giving a traffic ticket to a motorist, and he shot that officer dead. They are in mourning in San Antonio. They are looking for the suspect. When we get more information, we will certainly bring it to you. Casey Stiegel is live in Dallas with more now. Casey?
Yeah, John, we're following all of this. The Texas officer who lost his life was a 20-year veteran with the San Antonio Police Department, and he leaves behind 2 adult children. Investigators say Detective Benjamin Marconi, this man, was sitting in his police cruiser writing a traffic ticket when a car pulled up behind his. A man jumped out, ran up to the police car, shooting and killing Detective Marconi in broad daylight. Police have no other motives, as you heard, other than saying they believe this officer was targeted simply for wearing the uniform. Now, investigators have released photos of the suspect's vehicle that you see there and a person of interest in the case, hoping someone will recognize it and come forward. Now, yesterday evening, 2 different police officers in Missouri with 2 different police departments were also shot. One near Kansas City, where an officer was hit following a traffic stop but is expected to be okay. That suspect was killed by officers in a shootout. And also yesterday, a similar situation in St. Louis. Another police officer shot while sitting in his vehicle last night. Despite being hurt, the officer able to get back up and have backup brought in.
The officer says he saw the muzzle flashes and felt the glass breaking in his window as the shots came through and struck him in the head. The officer was able to get on the radio and call for assistance.
Now, that gunman was later found and also killed in a shootout with police. And if that wasn't enough, finally an officer in Florida recovering. Sanibel, Florida, the police department, that officer also shot during a traffic stop yesterday. He is expected to make a full recovery, and the gunman is in custody. So again, just to recap, 3 officers around the country hurt this weekend in separate incidents, 1 killed in the line of duty here in Texas. That suspect still on the run, John.
Casey Stiegel. Casey, thank you.
Iraqi special forces going door to door to weed out Islamic State militants in Mosul. How they're trying to keep the troops safe as they advance through enemy-held neighborhoods. Plus, President-elect Trump and the media. Some say he's getting the same treatment President Obama initially got, and why that's troubling. Our media panel weighs in. Fox Fox News alert on intense fighting in and around Mosul. Iraqi forces conducting door-to-door searches in the city's eastern outskirts and looking for potential suicide car bombs. After several attempted attacks earlier today, Benjamin Hull is live from our London bureau. Benjamin, welcome.
Yeah, hi Melissa. Look, it's been over 6 weeks since the operation to recapture Mosul from ISIS began, and frankly, progress has now slowed to a crawl. ISIS resistance remains as strong as ever in the city, with snipers in many of the streets, suicide vehicles coming out from different angles. Now, Iraqi troops have now had to slow up and regroup in the eastern outskirts of the city, but those are still 6 miles from the center itself. There's been a reluctance by the US and its allies to use overwhelming firepower, and that's in order to avoid civilian casualties, meaning that the forces now have to move house by house to weed out the fighters. Meanwhile, ISIS have continued to post footage showing their own fighters engaging Iraqi troops inside the city. It's a look from the terror group's eyes. Throughout the campaign, they have released a steady stream of videos showing their own ongoing battles. On Sunday, the Iraqi government sent half a dozen trucks of food into liberated areas of Mosul itself, some of the first aid the residents have seen in over 2 years. But more than 1 million people are still said to be in the city. Meanwhile, to the west of Mosul, there have been successes, but by Iranian-backed Shia militias, who recently captured the Tal Afar airbase. These paramilitary groups have continued their move to cut off the main supply route between Mosul and Syria, and are now attempting to finally surround the city itself. But among those groups is one called Kataib Hezbollah, and they've been designated a terror organization by the US. So you have a situation where the US-backed forces move from the east, and Iranian-backed forces, including this terror group, from the west. It's a reminder of just how complex the battle for Mosul really is. Melissa?
All right, Jonathan, thank you so much.
So with conflicts raging around the world, President-elect Trump faces a tough decision: who to nominate to be Secretary of Defense. One top contender, General James Mad Dog Mattis. So who is he? A man who knows the general very well joins us next. Plus, Mr. Trump sparking concerns among NATO members, calling the alliance obsolete during the campaign season. But what does the NATO chief have to say about working with a President Trump? NATO's chief says he looks forward to working with President-elect Donald Trump. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg spoke at the NATO summit in Istanbul, Turkey, where he touched on the election and on U.S. relations with our European allies.
I am welcoming the incoming administration in Washington. And I look forward to working with President-elect Donald Trump. The partnership between Europe and the United States has been rock solid for almost 70 years. A partnership that has always received bipartisan support in the United States. And better burden sharing will make the transatlantic bond even stronger.
Stoltenberg also said spending increases among European allies is a top priority, but not a new demand. During the election campaign, of course, Trump called for increasing contributions from NATO allies.
President-elect Trump holding meetings at Trump Tower today as he works to fill his cabinet, including a top post, Secretary of Defense. Over the weekend, Mr. Trump met with retired Marine General James Mattis, who held leadership roles in Iraq and Afghanistan, and with NATO before running U.S. Central Command. Yesterday, after their Saturday meeting, Trump tweeted, quote, General James Mad Dog Mattis, who's being considered for Secretary of Defense, was very impressive yesterday, a true general's general. Retired four-star General Jack Keane is chairman of the Institute for the Study of War. He's also a Fox News military analyst. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. I know you know the general well. I've been dying to get your impression. What do you think?
Yeah, I love that, Mad Dog Mattis. Anyway, nicknamed by his troops. Yes, listen, I know Jim Mattis well. This is an absolutely terrific choice if this is the decision that President-elect Trump is going to make, and it looks like he's heading in that direction. Why? He is an experienced wartime commander, as you noted. He is very thoughtful and insightful. He's absolutely conversant, Melissa, with all, I mean all, of the global security challenges that are currently facing the United States. And he knows that the indispensable item that is going to help provide stability and security to the world is strong American leadership. And we have not had that for the last 8 years. And frankly, it's sad to say, that's one of the reasons why the world is a much more dangerous place.
Yeah.
So Mattis understands all of that. And he knows a strong American military to back that up is essential.
Yeah, and he's blunt. I mean, one of the reasons I've read why he got the name Mad Dog is because he's not afraid to speak truth to power. And this was a problem for him before when he was delivering messages, maybe to President Obama, that he didn't want to hear about how things are going. Does that sound right to you?
No, it's absolutely true. He's a straight talker. He speaks his mind clearly. People know exactly where he's coming from. I mean, I'm not talking about somebody who's blustery or bombastic. I'm talking about someone who's thoughtful.
Right.
Presents his views in a very firm, unequivocal manner, and is widely respected in the Congress and much respected among the troops out there. And listen, just because we're going to assuming we're going to put a military guy as Secretary of Defense does not mean, therefore, we're more likely to go to war because we have a military man in charge of the Department of Defense. Quite the contrary. Military people, after years of exposure to war, know the horrors of it and the implications of it, always want to make sure, before we use that option, that all other options indeed have been exhausted, and this is what remains. Yeah. That's mostly where senior military people are coming from, and that's where Jim Mattis is becoming. And then, if the decision is made, there is only one answer. Yeah. Fight and win.
And
fight and win.
In spite of that toughness, he does have that reputation for being very sensitive about putting troops in harm's way. In the meantime, I want to move you to our other topic. President Obama speaking briefly with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the APEC summit in Peru over the weekend. I'm sure you read about that. The president urging greater efforts to end the violence in Syria as government forces backed by Russia push to retake rebel-held areas in Aleppo. This is a hopelessly tangled mess, General, where we have, the Syrians, the Russians, and the government there pushing against their own people, Assad against his own people. At the same time, you have ISIS. How do we untangle this, and what do the president's words mean now at this point in time?
Well, it's extraordinary, that narrative that he clings to, that somehow he's working towards a peaceful solution when he squandered so many opportunities to turn the momentum against the Assad regime so we could get a political solution. In 2011, the moderates came to the White House and were seeking arms and assistance. The Obama administration said no. In 2012, Clinton, Petraeus, Dempsey, and Panetta all recommended the same thing in 2012. He refuses. In 2013, when the chemical red line is crossed, this same national security team, except Kerry is now replacing Clinton, recommend military strike against the Assad regime. The purpose is not just retribution for using chemical weapons. The purpose is to change momentum against the regime so we can get a political solution. And he refuses. And he refused in 2014 and 2015 to establish safe zones that would be harbors for this human catastrophe that's taken place. So it is really frustrating when you're conversing with all these decisions, Melissa, and recognize that while we are not the cause of the Civil War, but we have contributed to it being protracted.
Yeah, certainly made it worse. It's quite a mess to inherit. General, thank you for joining us today. We always appreciate your time.
Good talking to you, Melissa.
The mainstream media's take on President-elect thus far, as some journalists seem to be digging in against normalizing Donald Trump, and how this is similar to the treatment President Obama initially received. We'll go in depth. Also, speaking of both leaders, what President Obama is saying now about potentially criticizing his successor after he leaves office. We're live with an update on that.
Right now, President Obama says he will withhold any criticism of President-elect Trump, but adding that he may not stay silent once Mr. Trump takes office. Mike Emanuel is live at the White House with this one. Sticky stuff, Mike.
Well, no question about that, Melissa. President Obama will be the first president in nearly a century to remain in Washington after his term. And since his philosophy is so different than President-elect Donald Trump, that leads to questions about how much he intends to comment on issues in the news and those matters facing the new occupant of the White House. Last night in Peru, Mr. Obama was asked about how much he intends to speak out and whether he will withhold public criticism of Mr. Trump. And he said he wants to be respectful of the office and to give the president-elect an opportunity to put forward his platform and his arguments without somebody, quote, popping off in every instance. But then Mr. Obama reserved his right to comment.
If there are issues that have less to do with the specifics of some legislative proposal or battle, but go to core questions about our values and our ideals, and if I think that it's necessary or helpful for me to defend those ideals, then I'll examine it when it comes.
The president praised former President George W. Bush, saying Mr. Bush could not have been more gracious when Mr. Obama took office. Mr. Bush was asked about this issue by our colleague Sean Hannity 2 years ago.
I don't think it's good for the country to have a former president undermine a current president. I think it's bad for the presidency, for that matter.
President Obama is remaining in Washington after his term to allow his daughter to finish high school, but that may lead to temptation for the former president, also the media, to try to get him to weigh in on major issues facing a new White House team. Melissa?
Interesting stuff, Mike. Thanks for that.
New questions about how some in the media are handling President-elect Donald Trump, with indications some journalists are refusing to, quote, normalize him. Our own Howard Kurtz, the host of Media Buzz, has this take. To be normalized would be to be treated as just another president-elect putting together his cabinet and White House staff. A normalized process would involve skeptical coverage, aggressive coverage, but would fit within the template of previous transitions. What those who decry the normalization of Barack Obama's successor are really saying is Trump is not a legitimate president and doesn't deserve to be treated as such. Joining us now, our media panel today, Kelly Riddell, columnist and commentary writer for the Washington Times, and Elvira Salazar, anchor of Mega TV News. Kelly, do you see indications that significant numbers of reporters out there in the mainstream media do not want to normalize the president-elect?
Yes, and it's just a continuation of what they did in the general election, but they called it a different name. They called it false equivalency, in the fact that you couldn't compare Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton because Donald Trump was, you know, he could blow up the Republic. Jim Rutenberg at the New York Times actually wrote a column about this and justified his own media reporters, his own political reporters' bias against going hard against Donald Trump. So this is just a continuation of the liberal elite media trying to intellectualize their continued bias against Donald Trump.
Elvira, do you see it the same way?
Well, my main concern, I would say, and speaking from the U.S. Spanish media, is the Latinization of the U.S. networks and in this country, because we are not here to be moral judges. We're not here to be dictating to the voters what is it that they have to think. And my main concern is that the news outlets and the news media could be becoming more Latin Americanized, and we know about that, and we do not like that scene.
For viewers who might not be familiar with what you mean by that, give us a little bit of elaboration.
What I'm saying is that the media outlets are serving their own interests and not the voters. In this case, like you were saying about the normalization, I think that we, like in the Latin America, we do not have to be moral judges. We don't have to be dictating moral lectures to the voters. Mr. Trump won by 60 million votes. The country has spoken, and we are no one in the news outlets to be saying to the voters that they were wrong or that they were right. And in Latin America, where my parents come from, that's what's happening. That's what's happening, or that happens very often. So we have to understand understand that not only we're talking to the American public, we're also talking to emerging democracies. We're talking to Latin America that looks at the U.S. press or the U.S. media outlets with respect, with admiration. We copy the American School of Journalism. So what's happening here is sending a message, not only, like I repeat, not only to the U.S. voters, but also to Latin America, to Asia, that look how we cover elected officials or politicians in the way that they would like to. Yeah. So this could have a lasting effect, not only for us, but for other emerging democracies.
Just try going on Venezuelan TV and criticizing the government there.
Absolutely. And look at Cuba.
Yeah.
You have to see that press is one of the pillars and one of the bastions of democracy. And if we are, and it's very good that we are so robust and so strong, but we got to be very careful because we have a very big responsibility. And that responsibility, Cuba press, Venezuelan press, North Korean press would love to have the power and would love to have the reach that we have with voters. And that responsibility brings, that power brings great responsibilities.
Kelly,
that's my take.
You note some ironies in the fact that reporters have sort of changed their tune over time about Donald Trump, the former candidate, now president-elect.
Yes, I mean, in the primary, in the GOP primary, you had liberal bloggers like Jamel Bouie who basically said, you know, Donald Trump is a moderate and he's a better fit for the presidency than a Marco Rubio or a Ted Cruz that are real heretics. They're really going to take this country in the wrong direction. Jonathan Chait at the New York Magazine basically wrote a piece on why liberals should embrace Donald Trump, saying that, you know, real threats again are Cruz and Rubio, and that there might be some good that comes within a Donald Trump's presidency. The day after the election, Jonathan Chait he tweeted, he goes, "I think this is the worst day of my life." I mean, what a melodramatic turn. This is not being truthful. Jamel Bouie, after the election, just wrote an article last week in Slate saying there is no such thing as a good Trump voter. So 60 million Americans out there who voted for Donald Trump, not one of them is good in his eyes. Yeah. It's just the hypocrisy is unbelievable.
And Kelly, sticking
and
with
we
you
saw that. I'm sorry.
Well,
yeah, we saw that we saw that in Spanish media in the U.S., not Mega TV. Sorry that I interrupted. We saw that exactly what she was saying. We saw it in Spanish television in this country, not Mega TV or other Spanish outlets. We have to understand that we have to remember that immigration, deportation, NAFTA, Mexico was one of the core issues for the Trump presidency. Nonetheless, we understood that we needed to stay in the middle. We needed to cover things as they were coming. Right now, there is terror in the immigration, or in the, I should say, in the Hispanic community, because we really do not know what Mr. Trump is going to do. But nonetheless, we got to stay in the middle, and we got to cover. We're storytellers. We're just reporting what's happening, not telling the voters what to think, including the 70% of Hispanics that voted against Mr. Trump or in favor of Mrs. Clinton. And that 30% we need to preserve, and we need to give everybody in our community, I should say, a fair chance to look at Mr. Trump the way he is, not how we imagine he is going to govern.
And when media question the legitimacy of this new incoming administration, Kelly, it only feeds, you know, people in Portland who go out and burn things down because they're unhappy that their candidate didn't win.
Yes, I mean, if you watch CNN, which some of your viewers may do, you'll know against General Flynn, the Islamophobia comments that the panel makes about him, calling him a Islamophobe. With Senator Jeff Sessions, all they want to do is talk about the 1986 confirmation hearings and nothing that he's done since then, and what a civil rights activist he has been. This is just further dividing our country, and it's fear-mongering, and it's something that the press, instead of calling names, should actually look into these people's records, and also look at the fact of the matter that Donald Trump is interviewing a bunch of people across ethnicities, female, male. He's having a Democrat, Tulsi Gabbard, over today. Yeah. So he's definitely trying to get the best people for his cabinet, and that's something that should be praised.
Kelly Riddell and Maria Elvira Salazar, thanks for being our media panel today.
Thank you.
Thanks to you.
A terrible day for police departments across the country after 4 officers are ambushed and shot in 3 different states. Coming up, we talk to a retired detective about what he says the federal government can do about this to keep police officers safer on the job. A Fox News alert: shock and anger as 4 police officers are shot in 3 different states in just 24 hours, one dying of his wounds. San Antonio detective gunned down while writing a traffic ticket in broad daylight. Hours later, 3 officers in Florida and Missouri are ambushed. All 3 of them are expected to survive. But many people asking what can be done to better protect our men and women in blue. Steve Rogers is a retired lieutenant detective for the Nutley, New Jersey Police Department and a former member of the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. You've also written 2 books on community policing, which is why we lean on you in these situations. Is it right, first of all, to connect these 4 things? Because they happen in a short period of time. It's our tendency to lump them together and say that there's a problem that unifies them that maybe we could solve. Is that right?
Well, I believe in part it's right, because the Justice Department has made it very clear over the past 4 years that when it comes to policing in this country, they have neglected police officers with regard to not providing them with the tools they need to address crime. And it's something that has to be fixed, and it can be fixed.
So you blame the feds for what's happening on a local level?
I blame the United States Department of Justice. Look what happened in Ferguson and in Baltimore and all those cities around the country where the police were hamstringed. They couldn't do their job. And now you have people who are, as far as I'm concerned, lunatics, but also we're finding that many of them are career criminals, which we'll get to in a minute, because that's part of the solution.
No, yeah, and you actually laid out what you think is a 3-step solution. First of all, you think that local police chiefs are going to have to mandate that it's always 2 officers that respond to everything. That sounds ideal, but tough. I mean, it requires a lot more manpower.
Yes, it does. When I was on the job, you know, you get a minor call, like in this case of the officer shot, parking ticket, you're alone. Can't afford that anymore. So either you have 2-man patrol cars or 2 patrol cars, and yes, it costs a lot of money, which leads us to problem solving number 2. The Trump administration has made it very clear they're going to be tough on crime. What they're going to have to do is hopefully provide funding. Where do they get the funding? Well, Mr. Trump has talked about cutting foreign aid to countries that are not friendly to the United States. Perhaps take some of that funding, put it in the police departments, or take some of that funding from these prisons where they've got HBO and all kinds of different benefits, and give it to the cops.
Yeah. You also say that there's a problem with judges in this country, and that's a controversial topic. What is your beef there?
Very controversial. We find that most of these people killing police officers are career criminals. They have criminal records 50 yards long, and that's because of soft liberal judges. Now, what's controversial about it? Maybe I'm the first person to say this. You know, you've got civilian review boards for cops around the country. Maybe we need to think about civilian review boards for judges. Very controversial. I know they'll oppose it, but judges make decisions that affect our very lives, more so probably than anyone else. And I don't think it would hurt to have civilians look at what kind of decisions they're making and why they are making these decisions.
Interesting. Steve Rogers, thanks for coming on. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, today, of course, kicks off a very busy travel week. Millions of Americans planning to hit the road or board a plane for the Thanksgiving holiday. But winter weather is complicating things, where an early snowfall is causing flight delays and problems on the roads.
I think it's absolutely crazy. I went to bed and I woke up and it was winter wonderland.
Let's check out what's ahead on Outnumbered at the top of the hour. Sandra and Megan, what do you have?
Hey, John. Well, the latest on the nonstop transition meetings at Trump Tower. Plus, the VP-elect says the administration will try to repeal Obamacare out of the gate. But the new Senate Minority Leader vows they'll regret those efforts. The battle has already begun.
And President Obama says if President Trump breaches certain values and ideals, he'll speak out after leaving office. Should he do so or do like other former presidents and keep quiet?
All that plus our hashtag one lucky guy. Outnumbered, please join us on this holiday shortened week.
We will. See you then.
See you then.
Thanks. Now this Fox weather alert, the season's first major snowfall in the Northeast could cause problems for Thanksgiving travelers. Laura Engel is live outside Fox headquarters with more on that. Laura.
Hey, John, well, a blanketing of snow will stick around for many people in the Northeast, but as we know, as you see this kind of cold weather come in, it brings a lot of headaches along with Mother Nature's chilly gift. We'll just call it that. If you are out on the road on some Northeast interstates, meteorologists warn visibility could go from clear to near zero in just a matter of a couple of miles. That's what we've been seeing over the last few days, adding things could get dicey for folks traveling along I-90 just east of Buffalo to Syracuse, going into the evening where a lake effect snow warning is in effect until tonight. Now, there were several inches of snow reported in many upstate New York spots. Some areas could see up to a foot more by the time the snow tapers off. High wind gusts, low visibility on the roads. It's just the right combination to make traveling challenging and dangerous.
We've been sitting inside just kind of watching out the window, watching it come down, and each time we look out, every checkpoint, it seems like there's more and more snow on the ground. We can hear the snow plows out moving around, so it's starting to get loud.
And it may be loud for a while. In Minnesota, the State Patrol reported 340 crashes and more than 550 spinouts over the last 4 days as a snowstorm swept across the state. Heavy snow also falling in parts of Nebraska and the Dakotas. Now, if there's any good news here, it's that this lake effect snow event will not last long. All of this should move out by tomorrow, giving kids and snow lovers a chance to enjoy the first real taste of winter we've seen. Of course, it's always fun and surprising the week of Thanksgiving, but not a lot of fun if you're out there traveling in it, John.
Yeah, I was a little stunned to see my backyard all coated in white yesterday morning.
Right.
Laura Ingle, stay warm. Thanks.
Thanks.
New on the next hour of Happening Now, a huge tree comes crashing down on an SUV. What happened to the people trapped inside? A survivor story they're calling nothing short of a miracle. Plus, a terror attack stopped in its tracks. The arrest police just made. We are live with that story as well.